Hello, my name is Major Mike Webb. For those who don't know me, back in the 1990s, I was the most junior commissioned officer ever in history of the United States Army to serve in the position of Operations Officer for All Strategic Counterintelligence in the continental United States, or CONUS is the acronym. If you have been following the news regarding the intelligence activities related to a novel coronavirus, you will know that in April 2020, George Stephanopoulos and ABC News disclosed that electronic surveillance had uncovered and reported to the former President, Donald K. Trump, indicia of an emergent public health threat in Hubei province that might potentially present a threat to U.S. forces in the Sino-Pacific theater. It is not normal to state in the news that we are conducting electronic surveillance against any country, but this is what George Stephanopoulos and ABC News did and attempted to corner the former Secretary of Defense using this information. As a key staff officer serving as the aide-de-camp for the commander of the counterintelligence activity at the time, I played a critical role in the formation of the precursor to that agency, now known as the INMIC, or National Medical Intelligence Center, and consequently have a unique perspective on a public health threat that has tangibly altered any conception of the American way of life. And the conclusion of our extensive investigation and analysis, prompted in part by litigation, which we shall present in this pandemic hogwash, is that a pandemic crisis could have and should have been avoided on day one, particularly in our science community. And that misaligned incentives resulted in the presentation of a national and world crisis that has become our new normal. I took an oath many, many years ago to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States and the American way of life. This briefing is based upon evidence readily available in the open source environment and is unclassified. The fourth topic in this unclassified informational brief discusses the current political situation with regards to what has been popularly described as a pandemic crisis. On March 21st, 2020, we filed a formal complaint with the city of Alexandria regarding lockdown orders, which was immediately dismissed, prompting our litigation that was filed on April 2nd, delayed by the stay-at-home order by a few days. The first legal challenge brought against the lockdown orders, and on April 15, 2020, without any named defendant making an appearance in court, on April 15th, the court dismissed a motion for temporary injunctive relief in error, imposing its judgment without conferring with the issuing state agencies. On June 24, 2020, with only the city of Alexandria and their mayor, Justin Wilson, the circuit court, a court of record, dismissed the case again in error, alleging that there was no justiciable issue, a matter remaining on appeal before the state Supreme Court since that time. Since April 2nd, 2020, however, in that litigation, in contempt of court and without court sanction, Ralph Northam and Muhammad Norman Oliver, by and through their attorneys, have selected or elected the peculiar defense strategy of evading service of a summons by the city sheriff, contempt of court. This action was brought in defense of constitutional rights under the Free Exercise Clause, and to date, by reason of the continued evasion of the governor and other Commonwealth parties, is the only lockdown litigation to be scheduled to proceed to trial against those parties. But only once the Commonwealth defendants are compelled to submit to jurisdiction of the Commonwealth courts, a prima facie case of a conspiracy to violate civil rights. It's only punishable by up to 10 years in prison. On June 2nd, 2020, we filed the first challenge against the facial coverings mandate in the Federal District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia in Richmond. And on June 25th, 2020, while the Commonwealth parties, including Governor Northam, evaded the United States Marshal in service of a summons, a felony obstruction of justice punishable by up to 20 years in prison, the court ordered an amendment to the verified complaint, apparently in an attempt to remove material evidence from the official court record. Actions beyond the veil of judicial immunity and subject to sanction. And on August 25th, 2020, the Federal District Court again, under suspect grounds and error, dismissed the amended complaint, failing to find a justiciable issue while ignoring the conduct of the Commonwealth parties, such as the governor, in their felonious evasion of federal law enforcement, which under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 6A should have mandated the convening of a grand jury for those felony crimes, for which, while on appeal to the Fourth Circuit on the underlying matter, not yet decided, we are filing a petition for writ of mandamus to compel that grand jury be convened, and any others as necessary. On March 12, 2021, we filed with the Chief Justice for the Supreme Court, the designated appellate judge for the Fourth Circuit, where our facial coverings challenge remains undecided since August, an emergency application for injunctive relief, akin to the application presented by the Diocese of Brooklyn last November, and in all forms similar in most respects, but on what appears at the present a dubious rationale from the clerk indicating that not all remedies have yet been exhausted. By March 17, 2021, the entire application was returned in its entirety, removing that record from the court. Our emergency application for injunctive relief presented a facial challenge, essentially, to the entire lockdown and COVID-19 response regime. And we are preparing a request for reconsideration. However, while there are no shortage of issues, pundits, Facebook groups, and Twitter complainants in traditional and social media, there have, at least in the courts of Virginia, been experienced a shortage of litigants in court, finding only a total of 15, which State Attorney General claimed to have easily defeated back in August. Yet, nor are there a shortage of defendants, albeit often in complex litigation difficult to find. But the push for vaccines, of which almost 3.6 million doses have to date been administered in the Commonwealth, finding almost 1.3 million of about 8.4 million fully vaccinated, and 28.1% of the population having received at least one shot, prompted our preparation for litigation, naming President Joe Biden as the lead defendant, particularly in his address on March 11th, promoting under all evidence of duress the vaccination of every American with a pharmacological measure that was rushed through approvals and for which there has not yet been determined an infectious dose. The vaccines were allegedly designed to prevent or block required information for assessing the efficacy of that measure and elevating his claims to the jurisprudential standards of inducement to fraud, especially to prevent the spread of a pathogen that no scientific study has validated quantifiably as infectious at all, and which all evidence indicates is a biological weapon of terror being deployed against citizens of the United States and has claimed lives of over 500,000. And under 18 U.S.C. Section 2332 Bravo, conspiracy to commit transnational terror is a felonious, high crime, and impeachable offense, as well as punishable by death. Subject to your fact checks, this concludes this informational briefing. This information is unclassified.
So here is the truth. My name is Major Mike Webb. And by God, I am running for governor of Virginia. I ask every Virginian and every American true to, like the motto of the infantry, follow me, and we shall overcome. Honest. And y'all come back now. Here.
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
And y'all come back now. Here.